Good afternoon. My name is Chris Bell, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel, The State of Black Mississippi. Today, we have an exciting panel that's joining me today. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Leroy Brooks. Supervisor Leroy Brooks is a graduate of Mississippi State University with a BA in Political Science and a Master's of Studies in Concentration of Public Health and Administration. In 1984, he was sworn in as the first African-American to serve on the Lowndes County Board of Supervisors. He also began his political and community development consulting firm. Because of his vast, diverse knowledge, Dr. Leroy Brooks has conducted workshops, forums, and served as a meeting facilitator for state and federal agencies. Supervisor Brooks is married to the former Charlotte Nash, and they have 2 children along with 2 grandchildren. Supervisor Brooks.
Good evening. I'm glad to be a part of this panel, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Now we have joining us Mr. Bill Bynum. He has worked to advance the economic opportunity for disenfranchised populations. He began his professional career in North Carolina by establishing Self-Help, a pioneer in the development finance industry, and later built a nationally recognized programs at the NC Rural Economic Development Center. In 1994, Bill Bynum moved to Mississippi to become the founding CEO of the Enterprise Corporation of the Delta. And in 1995, he organized Hope Community Credit Union. Dr. Bill Bynum.
Bill, thank you. It's an honor to be here with everyone this afternoon. I look forward to our conversation.
Next joining us, we have actress and producer Aunjanue Ellis from Magnolia, Mississippi, in case you didn't know. Aunjanue has starred in several roles, including The Help, If Beale Street Could Talk, The Clark Sisters, First Ladies of the Gospel. Aunjanue has been working in the film industry for more than 20 years. She has maintained her residence in Magnolia State, and she is an activist against the Confederate symbols that plague our state and our nation. Aunjanue Ellis, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Sandra C. Melvin. She is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Institute for Advancement of Minority Health. She serves as a Health Committee Chair for the Mississippi State Conference of the NAACP, and recently was honored in the Congressional Record for her work with health disparities. Dr. Melvin is an active member of several civic organizations, including Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and the Jackson, Mississippi chapter of the Links Incorporated. Dr. Sandra C. Melvin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this distinguished panel.
Let's get right to it. The state of Black Mississippi. Bill Bynum. The state of Mississippi, 16% of the residents are unbanked. Most U.S. households do not have a bank account. And the reason why they don't have a bank account, they say because they don't have enough money to start a bank account. How has this pandemic complicated the life for those unbanked in the state of Mississippi? And what is Hope Community Credit Union doing to help those individuals?
Point that is at the heart of what we do at Hope. We recently did a survey of our members and found that half of the people who are members of Hope Credit Union either did not have a bank account before they became members, or they were relying on payday lenders and check cashers for basic financial services that everyone takes for granted, but disproportionately they have to pay an arm and a leg for, and it just should not be allowed. And so what we have done over the past 25 years is to try to close those gaps that disproportionately affect people of color. And it is this pandemic, I think, has pulled the cover off of conditions that have been in existence for centuries. We saw a map not long ago of where slaveholding was most concentrated prior to the Civil War. And if you overlay that map with a map of where you have the highest rates of people who are unbanked, people who have the worst health outcomes, education outcomes, worst housing conditions. They're the same places. So this is something that has been loaded upon our people for centuries. And the pandemic, as it did with Hurricane Katrina, as it did with the financial crisis, it exacerbates conditions for those who are most vulnerable, which are disproportionately Black folk. In Mississippi, roughly 42% of white households live in liquid asset poverty. That means they don't have enough savings to cover 3 months of expenses to live a little above the poverty line. For Black folks, it's 72%. 42% versus 7 out of 10 Black people. If the wind blows hard, you're not going to be able to support your family. Half of the Black folks living in the city of Jackson are either unbanked or underbanked, in contrast to 15% of the white population. And so we've got systemic discrimination in the financial system. And if you look at any of those issues that I talked about, health, education, housing, jobs, at some point you need financial services. And so we try to do everything we can to close those gaps. It's really deplorable what people have to experience when you've got a Black household in Mississippi that has an income over $150,000 and 19% of their mortgage loan applications are turned down, roughly the same as you'll see for a white household with $30,000. So if you're $150,000 in income, you're as likely or more likely to get turned down if you're Black than if you're a white household with $30,000. And so we've got serious systemic issues that need to be addressed, and that's what we're trying to do at Hope.
And Dr. Bynum made a great point, and he talked about health disparities in the state of Mississippi. Dr. Melvin, can you touch on how those health disparities put us as African Americans behind the eight ball when it comes to our survival rates and things of that nature?
Well, Dr. Bynum made some great points about the importance of being fiscally solvent, and that runs over into your health outcomes. We know that the social determinants of health, and one of them being employed, having income, having access to care, even your race and gender, place you at higher risk for a lot of different health conditions. And one of the things that we also know is that one of the reasons that Black Mississippians in particular find themselves at a higher rate of death for most of the leading causes of death in Mississippi is because they don't have access to care. They don't seek care as early as white Mississippians do because they don't have access to care. And we also know that this is very important because in order for you to go to work, you have to be healthy. In order for you to take care of your family, you have to be healthy. And Black women in particular tend to suffer at higher rates because they are often the last people in the household to try to take care of themselves. And so when you look at the state, and unfortunately, many of the households are led by females. And that's a trend that we're seeing across the country, but definitely also here in Mississippi. So when you look at things like being able to get a loan, being able to have credit, being able to have a job, being able to access care sooner so that you know that you're sick and you can take care of it, those are very important things that place Black Mississippians at a disadvantage. There's no equity in the way resources are distributed in this state.
Thank you. And speaking of resources, Supervisor Brooks, you and I both know that it's hard to obtain resources from the state of Mississippi, especially when it comes to our communities. Can you touch on the manner of which, as a supervisor in the political arena, that you have to work extra hard to obtain funding for your district, for your county of Lowndes County, where you serve? Can you touch on how that affects the state of Black Mississippi?
Well, one of the interesting things is you go in understanding that in those instances where you're not in the majority, you're going to have a difficulty just trying to frame the problem. And one of the things that happen almost even in Lowndes County, a fairly wealthy county, is in the two majority Black districts, the quality of life is totally different from my white colleagues. And so when you are elected, you have to understand that part of your task is to represent your people. And I think the problem is sometimes we fail to govern and we fail to write the narrative. You know, when I was elected 37 years ago, it was 50 Black supervisors. Now we have 146. And we have quite a few majority Black boards of supervisors and, of course, city councils. What happens when we are in charge, we've got to govern. And then the other thing is we can't allow other people to write the narrative. So when you're sitting at that table and you understand that the people that you represent may be suffering, don't be afraid to bang on the table, because sometimes that's the only thing that they understand, because nobody just automatically gives you anything. So it's very important for those of us that serve in these positions, the first thing to understand, you are there to represent the people that sent you. It's not a thing, it's not a social gathering. It's about taking care of the business. And if you're not prepared to do those things to represent your people, you need to find another profession.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Aunjanue, this is a great question for you. I read a quote, and I know I'm going to mess it up, where you indicated that Mississippi has two gods, or they believe in two gods. One with the man with the noose around his neck has a different God than the one who's placing the noose over the neck. I know I'm messing it up, but can you expound on that if you remember that quote and if I said it correctly?
You got it right.
Okay.
You communicated the message. You communicated the message. We are on the other side of at least this Confederate flag being Confederate imagery being on the state flag of Mississippi. And we are going to vote on another flag, but it has "In God We Trust" on there. And so I said that because I know for a fact that the God that my grandmother prayed to every Wednesday night when she went to prayer meeting, and I was there with her for almost 18 years, is not the same God of these men and these women who have participated in the tradition of brutality and lynching and genocide that has plagued Mississippi. So yeah, that's what I meant, and you said it. I know that when these men and women who have been hung, so many of them who have been the fruit of trees all over the state of Mississippi, I know their last words was, "God, help me, help me." But you also have to think about the fact that the people who were doing the lynching, in their minds, were praying to the same God.
God, exactly. So
and I don't accept that. I know that is not the truth.
Powerful, very much so. So sticking with you, Aunjanue, for years and years, celebrities have always been politically active. Now, since, let's say, the year of Trayvon Martin was killed, all of our Black men and women have been killed by police officers. How has the activism that you've been a part of and that you see the new quote unquote Hollywood, those individuals, how is that different from what was going on in the 60s when you had Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier coming down marching with Martin?
Well, I have to say, I don't really want to necessarily, I don't want to be necessarily a judge of that. And the reason why that I say that is that this idea of what is of celebrity, I think I'm uncomfortable with. I don't personally do what I do because of the fact that I make a living acting in front of a camera. I mean, I was doing this kind of, agitation since I was like 10 years old in my church.
Right.
So it's inbred. But I will say, I think that there's a tendency to sort of, dismiss the activism of people who do make a living in front of the camera, and musicians and that kind of thing. But there's incredible work being done by some. What's problematic is, and it doesn't matter necessarily what you do for a living, whether it's acting, whether it's musician, or whether you're a plumber. If you're only in it for the short term, if you're only in it because it's cute at the time, then you don't serve us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Supervisor Brooks, you made a statement. I'm coming back to you. You stated that there were 50 supervisors at one point, and now there are 146 supervisors in the state of Mississippi.
Black supervisors.
Black supervisors. Now, of those 146, and I know you said some of them were majority boards, what is the consensus, or what is the thought process on these majority Black boards not hiring African Americans to do professional services or for contracts that you've been seeing?
We've had that discussed. I was one of the original founders of at that time, the Black Association of Supervisors. And of course, now they refer to it as the Minority Caucus. And of course, Congressman Thompson and a few others was part of that movement. And we were about Black business. We were about doing stuff for Black folks. And what we've witnessed over the years is that we are getting people that want to be fair. And I'm not sure what that means. Is that, when I use the word fair, it means those people I represent are being taken care of. And so we've had this discussion, and somehow they say, well, the attorney, daddy was the board attorney, and we know them. It's almost a fear of trying to help Black folks. It's that apprehension that if we reach out to Black vendors and Black attorneys and other Black people, we're going to be criticized as being unfair. Well, if you are a majority Black board, chances are you are in a majority Black county, which means you're representing the majority of Black people. Now, one of the stipulations need to be is that when you spend that taxpayers' money, you need to make sure that these people for real. It's not a fraudulent deal. The question don't need to be what's in it for me. But I see that apprehension with a lot of Black elected officials, that they are afraid they're going to get criticized by the press or people in the community. And let me tell you, after 37 years, I've seen white people get extremely wealthy off boards of supervisors. First thing is because that was the name of the game. And if you're going to change that dynamics, you got to come in again demanding that, okay, I'm not voting for this. John Doe can do this. And I've seen that on my board, that we had a Black that got a contract and he was cheaper than the whites. And they said, I don't see how he's going to do it. Well, he did it, and he did it successfully. But for those of us that's sitting in the positions, we have to be the advocate to give Black people a part of that taxpayers' money and not be afraid to be criticized, or being called unfair, Afrocentric. I'm a Black man. You can see this. I don't have any problem advocating for Black people. And you want that money to be spent in our community. So with a lot of the young elected officials, I hate to tell y'all this, but it's about the next party. It's about the next truck I'm going to drive. It's about all the perks of the position, where they're going in there demanding that our people be represented and then we get a fair share of the pie.
Exactly. And I appreciate you for saying that, because you are 100% correct. Dr. Carr, back to you. Melvin, I'm sorry. Dr. Melvin, back to you. We talked about the state of Black women in health a couple of weeks ago. Not you and I, but I had a conversation with someone talking about the health disparities of African-American women in the state of Mississippi. As you know, this legislature that I'm a part of has constantly and consistently tried to take the reproductive rights away from women and try to tell women what they're going to do with their bodies. The state of Mississippi, we have 40% African American population in this state. How can we, as Black men and women, get the other individuals who don't look like us understand that we are just as important as they are when it comes to health disparities?
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's our job to make them see that. I think that when we vote for our interest, that we are voicing our opinion. I think that we should be able to compromise, but the reality is a lot of people who say they are pro-life are really just pro-birth. We just had 545 babies taken away from their parents. And so if you're an advocate for pro-life, then for me, what that means is you're an advocate for the person who's already here, as well as for the person who has not made it here yet. So I think that in trying to tell our message, we need to also goes back to having a seat at the table. You can't advocate for something if you're not even in the conversation. And as far as what we're doing at the Institute, that is one reason we are actually beginning to put together our own health equity task force so that we can identify our problems as well as identify our solutions. We know that we're at the bottom of every list for every health outcome, but we have to have a voice and we have to actively participate in the development of those solutions. If someone already has something, they're not just going to give it to you. You have to be able to develop your own strategies for dealing with that. So I would say the most important thing we can do is know the things that we need and vote for the people who are going to help us to get those things.
Aunjanue, you want to chime in?
A little bit, yeah. I maybe I have more of a question, and you guys can, we can talk about it a little bit more. But I think this idea of a seat at the table is always problematic for me, and the reason why I say that is because it is as if that is the best that we can ask for is a seat. And I'm a huge I constantly preach to myself and whoever will listen that the food that's served at the table is poison, and the house that the table is in was never built for us. So what I would like to sort of add to this, to the great work that is it Dr. Melvin? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. What I would what I want to be a part of in this next sort of iteration of who we are as Black people in Mississippi is I want to be a part of that work that you just alluded to about what do we do outside of that system that doesn't speak to us? Because even when we vote, sometimes the people we vote for still don't represent us, or they don't get elected. So what do we do? What do we do outside of voting? And I am a strong proponent, and I'm going to be speaking about this more and more and more, of how do we create these resources and structures that can serve us outside of the system, so we can take care of ourselves when these crises come about, right? So whether the system responds to us or not, we will be all right.
Thank you very much. So very well said. Bill Bynum. So when I was in college, we had a table set up in the union. We came in between classes, and they asked us to fill out this paperwork. And man, we stood in that line and we filled out two pieces of paper from two different corporations. One Discover card and the other MasterCard. And you know what happened? All our credit got jacked up. I mean, we went on let me just speak for myself. I went on a spending spree.
I was with you. I did the same thing.
I went on a spending spree, and if it wasn't for the good heart of my grandfather, who pulled me to the side and paid those bills off for me, and yes, he took those cars from me, but he got my credit back on track. Is there a way that, or is Hope Community Credit Union going into our colleges and universities, explaining to our young students, our future generation, how to maintain their credit?
But Bill, I was right there with you, getting my credit jacked up. I had to learn how to pass a swimming test to graduate from college, but I didn't have to learn how to balance my checkbook.
Right.
And for many of us, that's just nothing that our parents had a lot of experience with either. They did the best they could, but you look at the wealth gap in the United States, you got a 10-to-1 disparity between Black folks and white folks. It's 100-to-1 Black families with children compared to white families with children. 100-to-1 wealth gap. So we really are putting our future at risk when you think about the fact that already in Mississippi, over half of the children below age 18 are not white. So the future workforce, the future economy is going to be a lot more diverse. And so if we are leaving folk, not equipped to be productive, if you're getting the worst education, the worst health, the worst, everything, then you're just shooting ourselves in the foot. So we're doing everything we can. We've got a branch at Provine. We go not just college, we're going into high school, and brilliant young folks learning a trade that they can apply later, and learning work discipline, which is something more and more people need to be know what it means to get up on time and be responsible. Whether they become a banker at Hope Credit Union or not, they're learning valuable skills, but they're also being exposed to money. The fact that the sooner you start saving, the more you're going to earn, the more likely you are to be different than most people at age 18 when they have negative net worth, as opposed to a few $100s. And studies show that when you have even a few $100s, you're more likely to go to college, or 3 times more likely to go to college, and 4 times more likely to graduate from college. And it's a game changer, just having that future orientation. And so we're working in the high schools. We are working, we did a really exciting project with Jackson State and with Valley, where we have partnered with them to both extend financial services to the staff and faculty, but also when you think about where HBCUs are, the neighborhoods around them are going to be disproportionately distressed. And so we're working to try to do business development, housing development, to improve conditions on and around those campuses, partnering with the colleges. And so that creates internship opportunities for the students. It also, you talk about student debt, next to a home, the largest item on a family's balance sheet today is student debt. And unfortunately, a lot of folks are not getting a return on that investment. They're going to some of these schools, these pop-up schools that are not doing what Jackson State and Valley and Tougaloo are doing for our folks. And so you're only in debt without a toolkit to take with you and build your future. And so it's really important that we engage folks early. I think is what you're referring to. It's absolutely critical.
Very much so. So switching gears, we talked about the state of Black Mississippi. We talked about the disparities, the health disparities. We talked about the unbanked. Let's talk about something that the president's son, Jared Kushner, said on national TV. Don't look at me like the Aunjanue. I know it's, don't do that. When he said on Fox and Friends that he questioned if Black Americans wanted to succeed in the state of Mississippi. I know, I don't know anyone that wakes up every morning and just wants to be a basic individual. I know in the state of Mississippi, we have our brothers and sisters that wake up every day and want to make something of themselves. So when you hear someone outside of our community, how can we, and I need everyone to answer this one, how can we make sure that our young people understand that not only are they our future, but understand that we are somebody. I know we can't be everyone's parent. I know that's not our role, but can you explain to me and those viewers that are watching, why would someone have that opinion of African Americans?
Representative Bell, I'll start that conversation. It's not new. They've always had that view of African Americans. And I think, again, it goes back to something that Dr. Melvin alluded to. We are going to have to write our own narrative. We're going to have to define the issues in our community. And rather than us always going to the table, we're going to have to invite them to the table and say, this is how we define it. And you got to be a part of this. And I think that what's happening, we are always reacting to what they characterize about Black folks, rather than we have the intellect, we have resources, we have those things in our community, certainly in the state, that we can come together and say, this is the Black agenda for Mississippi, or this is the Black agenda for Lowndes County. You know, we've got a Black mayor and 4 of 6 council members are Black. We got 2 Black supervisors. We got a majority Black school board. My point is, we can decide what the issues are in our community. And we can go about the business of trying to find the resources financially and intellectually to say, this is the direction that we're moving in. And if there's a county over there that lacks some of the scholarly needs, then we go over there. You know, it's like we've got to crisscross to help our brothers and sisters that need help, rather than always reacting to what white folks say. We've got to define what we want our communities to be, what we want our neighborhoods to be. I'm sure in most of y'all's community is the Black kids just tearing up stuff. They're not going up in the rich neighborhoods. They're tearing up their own neighborhoods because we don't have any standards. So I think Black folks got to go back to the folks that raised us, that has some basic standards, that say we're not going to tolerate this. This is what we want, and we're going to collectively. There's a group in Columbus, 100 women. They put up $100 a year to raise money to give to different groups. And I said to a couple of guys today, that should be a drop in the bucket. And that's the way we've got to start thinking about, how do we take care of ourselves and not react every time white folks say that we're lazy, and then we have to debate whether what they said is valid, when we should create our own narrative.
Right. Aunjanue.
Well, I don't give a
Tell me, yay, don't hold back.
I don't give a damn about what Jared Kushner says about Black people. What concerns me is Black men meeting with Jared Kushner.
Yes.
Stop. Keep going.
And affirming and validating this man, this administration, this man and his father, with this idea of wooing these leaders. This is what they call themselves, leaders in our community, by a platinum plan. I don't know what it's called, but a platinum plan. So I don't give a damn about Jared Kushner, but I have to tell you that it is heartbreaking to me to see someone like Lil Wayne shaking hands and smiling and grinning with 45. I feel betrayed by that. I feel betrayed by that as a Black woman, as a Black person, but particularly as a Black woman. And I want to say this though, that I'm saying this fully with full knowledge that this is an emotional reaction. It's not one that is very considered, because I just saw that picture last night, and I stayed up last night because it hurt me so badly. I don't care what Jared Kushner says about Black people, but I do care about our men validating the existence of Jared Kushner.
Man. Dr. Melvin, you have anything to add?
Well, I'll just say that when people like Jared Kushner make statements like that, they make it from a point of privilege. They make it from a point of generations of having things that our young Black men and women don't. And I do want to push back a little bit on the idea that Black people don't have standards in some cases, because what I will say is this: when you go through generations of trauma, when you go through generations of one parent families or having to figure out how to make a way out of no way, then you are going to have a more, I would say, a more primal instinct. Because at the end of the day, if some of our kids had the same privileges that people who can stand there and say, you know, we don't want anything else for ourselves, but they consistently put roadblocks in our way so that we don't have the same opportunities, I think it's an unfair judgment, and one that he's not really qualified to make. And it also goes back into that whole thing of implicit bias that we see, and explicit bias and overt racism, really, as well as feeding into those stereotypes about what Black people can or cannot do or what we want for ourselves. And going back to the meetings that he has had with people that basically, to be quite honest, you even vote? You're meeting with people that don't speak for other Black people, number one, who I honestly haven't seen them have a record of saying anything within the Black community that elevated us to anything besides waiting 5 days before the election to all of a sudden have this magical platform. So if we're going to have a conversation about who speaks for us, those are not people that I think represent Black people. And the state of really Black United States is the product of generations of trauma, generations of not having, generations of systemic racism and discrimination. Some of them would not last through some of the things that our ancestors have gone through. So to say that we don't want, we've always wanted. But what we can see is that there's always this overt way that they put barriers in our place so that we cannot achieve the things that we want. And those are the things that we need to be fighting to address.
Exactly. Bill Bynum.
No, I think Sister said it very well. You just cannot drink the Kool-Aid when you see consistently coming out of this White House, this administration, rollback of things that we thought was settled doctrine, right? From calling people of color, rapists, and the misogyny and the voter suppression. It is I think unreal that people of color can take seriously anything coming out of this administration. The data consistently have been that there's no evidence that they're supporting the empowerment and the improvement of communities of color, whether it's Charlottesville or Minneapolis with George Floyd, with church in Charlottesville. And so we've got to, and with murders in Charlottesville, we've got to look at the evidence and make data-based decisions, not react to what Fox and Friends wants you to hear. I really think it's critical that we recognize that people like Charlie Schrapp, the CEO of Wells Fargo, when he said, I can't find any qualified African Americans to hire in these decisions. Well, you look around you, I have had no problem finding the best people in the banking business to come and work at Hope, and they can run circles around people at Wells Fargo, making loans to people who the traditional financial industry says are not worth the risk. Well, during the financial crisis, our mortgage portfolio outperformed Bank of America's mortgage portfolio because we didn't put people into exploding mortgages that they couldn't afford just to rake fees and get rich off of them. We made sure that they work for the people. And so 85% of our mortgages are to first-time home buyers. And and when you look at, again, this is generational stuff. There's no better way to close the racial wealth gap than housing and entrepreneurship. But again, when you look at who has access to those resources, you cannot rely on folks who are making statements like the CEO of Wells Fargo. Or when you look at what happened with J.P. Morgan Chase, and when a wealthy black man in Phoenix tried to go in, they said, "Well, you don't look like somebody whose business we want." So we've got to distinguish between what's best for our community and what people are trying to fill our heads with.
Exactly. And I want to thank you for that, because you stole my thunder on the Wells Fargo. That was my next question coming up. But as being a part of this body of the Mississippi State Legislature, I had the opportunity to take part in the dialogue and the discussion on changing the flag. And in that dialogue that we had amongst the members that don't look like me, there was a commonality in that they realized that it was time to change the flag. And with some hesitancy, some of those individuals stepped forward and voted the right way in to change this flag. Where do each of you see the state of Mississippi within the next 10 years? Do you think that we can keep this commonality, this bond that we currently have now, I know, right, Aunjanue? Yeah, don't look at me like that. To have an opportunity, as we did this year, to override the governor's veto on a couple of bills. Do you think that this body currently have finally come to Jesus and realized that it's time to change the state of Mississippi? Anybody?
Are you talking about your legislative body?
I'm talking about my legislative body.
I'm going to say no. Mm-hmm. I think it was a situational thing with the flag, with all these college presidents and coaches and things and it became an economic issue. But I think overall, Mississippi is Mississippi. And I want to share with y'all a situation we was talking about racism. A couple of weeks ago, my board elected a board president. Now, there's 2 blacks on the board. I've been there 37 years. My colleague been there 13 years. And the 2 white guys are lined up with the newly elected supervisor, white supervisor that's been there 10 months and made him board president. And prior to that, it was never any criteria, and they decided it needed to be a criteria. These white politicians will change in certain situations. But I think they feel that their task is to preserve this heritage of Mississippi. And I don't think that it's all about Republican versus Democrat, because when you look at when Democrats were in control of the state legislature and compare some of the legislation, it's no better than when Republicans is. I think that race is a major factor in the state of Mississippi. I think it's going to continue to be. I think number 45 has kind of incited people to believe, we're seeing things that we probably haven't seen in our lifetime. So I'm not real positive to think that out of the goodness of their hearts, they're going to develop this relationship with black folks to do the right thing, because it means that they've got to relinquish power and share power. And that's not something many of them are interested in doing.
So with that being said, with the issues of the state of Mississippi, a lot of our rural communities don't have broadband. They don't have internet access. So that puts us further behind the 8 ball when it comes to education. How do you see the state of Mississippi dealing with those issues? Now, white folks in some rural areas are having these same issues. So how do you see the state of Mississippi and those partners that have been advocating for broadband to access in all these rural communities? Dr. Melvin?
We've got a long way to go on whether it's broadband, healthcare, education. There are significant gaps. but I don't think that we can rely on anyone else to do for us. We've got to increasingly do for ourselves. And I know that it looks like a lot of the power and the control are in other folks' hands, but again, we have more children of color in Mississippi than white children. The vast majority are Black. And so it's inevitable that we will eventually have the numbers to put more people in office. We have to do that, even though you see voter suppression at every turn. But when we take control of our future, then these issues will become less of a challenge to us. We'll be able to make decisions, and hopefully we will make decisions that are in the best interest of our people in our communities. We've got to control these resources. Hope is a Black-owned and women-owned financial institution, and I will look at any financial institution in the country and argue that we are doing more for communities of color than any other financial institution because we're accountable to those communities. Right. When the ownership is not anchored and when the decisions are not anchored in your community and informed by the real that exists on the ground, you're going to get outcomes that are not in your best interest. Also, one important point, 85% of the members of Hope Credit Union voted in the last election because they had a stake in the game. When you're a homeowner, when you have a bank account, when you feel that your decisions matter, you go to the legislature, you go to your town board and your county commissions, county supervisors, and tell them what you expect of them and hold them accountable. But when you don't have a second stake in the game, you don't weigh in. And so I think really taking ownership, recognizing that increasingly we are the majority of the population and taking control of these decisions and taking control of our communities.
So we started this flight at 4:00, and as your pilot, I want to make sure that we land and make it to our destination on time. And as our parting words today, I need each of you to give me a vision of what you want to see, the hopes and ambitions that you want to see for the state of Mississippi. Whether it's growth and economic development, I'll let you decide what you want to see the state of Mississippi. Dr. Melvin, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Representative Bell. What my vision for Mississippi is, and what I work for every day, is for our communities to have the same access to health care, to a healthy quality of life, to healthy families. I look towards a Mississippi where our voices mean something. And also, I would like to see a Mississippi where we recognize the power of our voices. I want us to create our own solutions. I want us to create our own tables. I want us to create our own partnerships. And actually, we don't have to always invite everybody to the table. Sometimes if the situation calls for it, but when we create that table, we need to develop the table specifically for us. And so my vision is for us to be healthy, happy individuals that have the same chances to have the same families that everyone else in the state has.
Supervisor Brooks.
I would like my Mississippi is those individuals that are in positions of authority in leadership roles, that we would have a collective dialogue about the issues that's facing our community. And that through that dialogue that we would come up with some plan of action that would impact our lives, that those of us that serve in positions, whether you be elected or appointed or in the business community, that we have that dialogue to say we can work together. We can create a collective kind of voice to address some of the issues. And I think out of that, we create a level of expectation that will encourage young people to believe that they can be successful and that we move in that direction. And I know a lot of things we can't do alone, but I think the beginning starts with us coming together, defining who we are, what we want. How many Black legislators you got? We got 146 Black supervisors, we have one of the largest number of Black elected officials in the country. And so that means we sit at a table somewhere. So what we need to start doing is having a dialogue with one another. Is what you're going to find. It doesn't matter if you're in a Magnolia, Mississippi or Columbus, Mississippi, that some of the problems are similar. And so that's my vision from Mississippi, Black folks talking one to the other to develop what I always characterize in a very simple term, a Black agenda.
Amen. Bill Bynum.
You know, I want us to own the table, at least our share of the table. And you know, it is, you know, again, in a country that's becoming increasingly Black, we can't be on the outside looking in. While I run a financial institution, that's a tool. The objective is a Mississippi, a Deep South, that where you live, what your race is, who your parents were, what your beliefs are, don't determine your ability to climb the economic ladder. But for so many people, that is the case. And so we want to eliminate those barriers, give people the opportunity to control their destiny. And if that's through being a member of Hope Credit Union, that's fine. But wherever you are, you need to own your assets and control your own destiny. That's what I want for Mississippians.
Last but not least, Aunjanue.
A couple things I want to say, and I hope you guys will bear with me. But I want to say this because I would love if this conversation extended beyond this conversation. And what I mean by a conversation, and from this, I mean not just talking. I mean action. I'll tell you two things that have happened to me over the last 3 days. One is I was on a panel yesterday with some professors from Jarvis Christian College, and one of the you know, it was a vote and get out to vote panel, and one of the panelists said, and he knew I was from Mississippi. One of the panelists said, in reference to Cindy Hyde-Smith, he said, how is it that Mississippi has a 39% Black population and it still is in the same situation it's always been, and they still put someone like Cindy Hyde-Smith in office? And I had to get him straight, and I did get him straight. But the reason why I'm saying this is that there is a perception about Mississippi that is incorrect, that we have to take the reins in correcting it, not just because we want to do some reputation refurbishing, but because it affects how we do business outside of Mississippi and how we do business with ourselves. And so this idea of being on the outside looking in, the way that I look at this whole idea of a table, I believe that we are the outside and the inside. And I believe that the kind of work that needs to be done for this next phase of who we are, the next phase of being Black in Mississippi, the state of Black Mississippi, is that as much as we have representation is not enough. And so we have to, this table that we're talking about, I cannot say enough. The food is poison. The house was not built for us. So we have to build other resources, other apparatus that serve us. And we cannot use the master's tools to do that. That's what Audre Lorde talked about. We cannot do that. 2 examples. One is when I was in school 30 some years ago, I had to have a vocational teacher tell me that I had to take the ACT, and I was in the 11th grade. And I was first in my class, but a vocational teacher told me that, right? So I had to go to my, regular counselor and say to her, we're supposed to take something like the ACT. And this white woman begrudgingly said, oh yeah, you're supposed to do that. But meanwhile, we took the ASVAB, the test to get into the Army. 30 plus years later, the principal at my school, my alma mater, is trying to find money so he can prepare his students to take the ACT, because most of them don't even know that they have to take the ACT. So this is what brings me to this point. So what I'm doing is I'm going to give them the money so those kids can take the ACT. This whole Wi-Fi desert thing that we're going through, Miss Dr. Melvin, I think that you said that you are a part of the Jack and Jill organization. Am I right?
No, the Links.
Links.
Yes, that's who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The Links. I'm sorry. It might be Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill. I think Jack and Jill has adopted several schools in the JPS system to provide Wi-Fi for them, because it's, several hundred of them don't have Wi-Fi, and these kids are sitting outside McDonald's trying to do homework, and the police are getting called on them while they're doing that. So I'm putting money towards, I have sent a check to them, to Jack and Jill, I think it's Jack and Jill, to pay for that so these kids can have hotspots. I'm saying, I'm not trying to toot my horn by any measure of the imagination, but what I see is, no matter what happens on Tuesday, I done voted, my aunts and uncles done voted, my sister has voted, everybody in my family has voted. But I know that no matter if Biden wins or Trump wins, God help me, I know that some of the things that we are still dealing with, we are still going to deal with. So how do we function outside of that system? And I want to be a part of building that in the state of Mississippi. So my vision for the next phase of Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, is being a part of building something that we create, that we build ourselves and for ourselves.
Amen. Thank you. I hope that the audience watching has enjoyed us tonight, this evening, rather. We've had a great dialogue conversation with this panel, and I am humbly and grateful to be a part of it. And hopefully we can adjourn together, meet again together, and have further dialogue in building the new Mississippi. So with that being said, thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Thank you all. Enjoyed
Bye-bye.
it.
I learned so much from you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Well, this has been a dynamic day. It has been a very full day. We started out this morning's conversation with a senior member of Congress and the youngest mayor of the city of Jackson. And the conversation was so rich, we had to put them out and kick them off of the broadcast because they just didn't want to stop. So that's how we started out the day. And then following that, we had some very important conversations about the impact of climate justice on our state, our public schools, the criminal justice system and reforms that need to be made, climate justice, the impact of COVID on Black businesses. So much rich conversation. And we hope that the message is always that we don't want to just focus on the problems with our leadership summit. We will also want to focus on solutions. So we hope that you gain some solutions today and you see yourself inside of this work, and that we can continue, like Aunjanue Ellis just said, we can continue to build together. That last panel on the state of Black Mississippi was very informative. Usually when we have this discussion, it goes on for hours and hours, but we know that it's impossible to keep people virtually for that long. So this is definitely not the last time. I'm sure you guys heard what I heard. This is a conversation that needs to go on and on and on. We have to continue to talk. We have to continue to meet. And I know we're tired of meeting, but we have to continue to meet. We have to continue to plan. We have to continue to strategize, because a new Mississippi is possible. I want to thank Ayanna and Yumika and Sherry and Ashley and Deontay and all of the back office support that made this conference possible. today. I also want to thank the rest of One Voice staff. You guys have really held it down over COVID and put in some heavy hours and put in some really good and meaningful work for Mississippi. I also want to thank One Voice's board for all of your continued support. And I also want to thank our partners and volunteers. This gathering would not be possible without the support of groups like the Mississippi Legislative Black Caucus, the Mississippi Association of Black Mayors, NBC Leo, and Mississippi Conference of Black Supervisors. This is your vision, and we look forward to continuing to work with you as well as our community partners to continue to make a better Mississippi. Thank you so much.